Welcome, friends, to India and the World segment of the Nationalist View. And today we have with us Mr. N.C. Bipindra, who is Executive Editor of Eurasian Times and a keen watcher of international relations and strategic affairs. Thank you, Bipindra ji, for taking out time and joining our program. And today we are going to discuss the implications of Russia-Ukraine war for India and the lessons which we need to learn from it. It has been 2 years since this war started somewhere between February 20th to February 24th in 2022. So, and there have been heavy casualties on both sides. Initially, everybody thought that this war will be a very short kind of war, but it has prolonged on, and it has also, to a large extent, reset the geopolitical balance. And Bipindra ji, your opening thoughts, what are the implications, what are the lessons which we need to learn from this?
Yeah. So this, Russia-Ukraine war actually is a manifestation of what you rightly pointed out, geopolitics. What essentially happened was that the Russian Federation, currently headed by President Putin, felt very threatened by the expansion of NATO. So at one point of time, even Russia wanted to become part of NATO. They had almost agreed to it, but of course, NATO as a military alliance is against Russia and formerly the USSR. So that is the background and history of this conflict. So when Ukraine wanted to become a member of NATO, Russia obviously felt threatened because it's already being surrounded by several NATO nations, and because of which they uh, decided to teach Ukraine a lesson. That is what happened. So I'm not justifying the war that is going on currently, but I'm just trying to recall what is the background, historical background behind it. But what essentially happened because of this Russia-Ukraine war was that the geopolitics got into a churn, and there is certainly fluidity at this point in time where we really don't know how the geopolitics is going to emerge. And what we see is that there is an impact of this particular war on several factors, and it is particularly very important for India because we consider Russia as a very important strategic ally, and this alliance, or rather, there is no alliance, but this relationship, this deep relationship between India and Russia goes back, about 60 odd years now, or at least 6 or more decades right now, starting from the late 50s, early 1960s. This trajectory, we have seen that we have been deeply enmeshed militarily, strategically, and geopolitically with Russia. So it has multiple implications, and we are reading about it. We are getting to know about it. India's energy security is a big question mark. Because of what is happening in Ukraine. There are also issues like China's support to Russia on many fronts. So where does Russia balance between India and China? So these are all a lot of questions that come up, essentially because of which we find that there is currently some sort of a uncertainty in geopolitics, and this great power battle is going on, and Ukraine-Russia war is a very important aspect of this great power battle that is going on at this point in time.
So as far as the we have seen extensive use of drones in this, and we have also seen extensive use of other unmanned vehicles also. So as far as India is concerned, so how do you see? We have recently done a deal with United States to procure some of the most advanced drones. So it's ironical also to a large extent because United States has been one of the key opponents of Russia in the Russia-Ukraine war. But how do you see, do you think that there has been a rethinking in the Indian defense establishment because you track it so closely that uh, in wake of this Russia-Ukraine war that probably we need to relook at, or probably we need to tweak a little bit or do some certain additional things, especially on the technology front?
Yeah. So drone as a as a military equipment is kind of growing exponentially at this point in time. Essentially, the drone warfare was manifested, say, in the Armenia-Azerbaijan war that happened in 2020, when Azerbaijan decimated Armenian forces, armored troops, completely using drones that they had bought from Turkey and other places. So, that was a very decisive war that happened with the use of drones. So ultimately, so that is being reflected even in the other wars that we have seen later, including the Ukraine-Russia war. See, if you look at it, what has happened is Ukraine, uh, having difficulties with its military industrial complex, they have started relying on off-the-shelf available drones that you can buy online, and remodifying them into a weaponized drone. So what do we find is that even Russia has been using drones extensively. So some of the new aspects in drone warfare that we see is this use of cheap, easily available drones and remodifying them to using them as kamikaze weapon, basically a suicide drone. So what happens is it is completely packed with explosives, and it goes and bombards against a military equipment or a military installation, and completely destroys that particular target. So this kind of a thing is something that has emerged newly. And there is also something called as a first-person view drone, FPV drones that they talk about, which again is which also provides you a clear video of the target that they are attacking. So that we have seen, and of course both Ukraine and Russia have started modifying their armored vehicles by putting up a net above the weaker spots of the armored vehicle, so that it is protected against such a drone. So despite that, these tactics are not really working, yet these tactics are being adopted extensively. So what I mentioned about Armenia and Azerbaijan war it was the turning point as far as the drone warfare is concerned. So India is also obviously looking at it and taking lessons from this kind of drone warfare that is extensively growing, and we already have multiple Israeli drones. So we have searcher drones and other drones that we have, which we are also modifying and fine tuning it. Some of the Israeli drones we are converting them into armed drones, and currently we are buying this MQ-9B drone from the US, which is manufactured by General Atomics, which is a US-based company, which is essentially, we are openly telling that it is essentially a surveillance drone, but actually it has also armed uses. Like you can pack them with missiles and then you can target. And this has been displayed by the US armed forces in several places in conflict zones across the world, particularly in Afghanistan and Iraq and all these places. They have used it to take out Al Qaeda leaders and militants and terrorist leaders and all. They have used it to take out those people. So they are quite effective. But there is a downside side to it also, because in the recent times, in a zone where there is a conflict zone where you have opponents who are also well capable, then these drones find it a little bit difficult to operate. I'm talking about specifically about MQ-9B and some of these some of these Predator drones. It actually comes under the Predator drone family. They have been taken out by a competitor, essentially a competing force on the ground. They have taken out through air defense. So that is what we see. The other aspect of the Ukraine-Russia war is the air defense aspect of it. How air defense is becoming more crucial. Like for example, Russia has lost two Alpha 50 spy planes. It's called as Biriv in Russian terminology. They call it as Biriv. This spy plane has also been taken out by air defense missiles. deep inside Russian territory. It's not as though it was flying over Ukraine and Ukraine forces took it out. It was flying deep inside Russian territory, and the Ukrainian air defense took it out. So India is also purchasing a lot of these spy planes, as they call it, AVACs, as they call it. So these are all some of the new trends that we see in the Ukraine-Russia war, and drone warfare is a major factor and aspect of it.
Another important aspect is, that we saw that actually one of the biggest lessons which we see is in terms of the energy security. Uh, Initially, because Russia was facing sanctions from the West, so it's a different matter that the oil which is coming to India now, that oil is routed to the West. And in fact, the Western economies were crippling in initial days because they are heavily dependent on Russia for gas. So, but in the long run, because it seems, the we have recently seen, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi launching a major mission on renewable energy in terms of the solar, creating capacity for the solar energy. So, do you think somehow, though it may not be mentioned, but the it's a lesson for India, which probably the policymakers have taken it in the right stride, that we need to make India as much self-reliant as we can in terms of energy security. So, how do you see this?
Absolutely. See, if you look at energy security, what is the requirement that has been projected? Actually, the current requirement is that by 2040, the Indian demand for energy sources is going to jump between 30 to 60% since the 2019 base year. So the power demand is going to double or even exponentially grow in the coming years, and in the next 15 to 16 years, it's going to see a huge jump. Essentially, because of some of the policies of the Narendra Modi government, where they are pushing for Atmanirbharta, which actually means make in India, and all these, which means that India's production levels, manufacturing sector is going to grow drastically, and power is a major need. But as of today, if you look at the 2021 figures, India is importing about 80% of its oil needs, crude oil needs. It's also importing about 50% of its gas needs, and about 25% of coal. India is also, coal extracting nation. Yet we are importing about 25% of coal from globally. And what is your, annual cost of energy security is about $165 billion. So that is the huge bill that India has to pay for its energy security. So what you find is that the energy needs of India is growing, and we are expanding our sources of this the energy sources that we require. And Russia is now becoming a major supplier. I think we were the top importer of Russian oil in the last couple of years. Essentially, because when the Ukraine war started, Russia offered India a discount, a major discount, which we accepted. And currently, I think we are importing, somewhere around 1.75 million barrels per day. That is the kind of import that we are doing, which was, which is almost 140% increase, since 2021. So this figure I'm talking about is the 2023 figure. In about one and a half years time, the jump was about 140%. So that is how this is growing, and it's very important for us to ensure that our energy security is taken care of, because we are projecting a GDP growth and emerging as probably the second largest GDP in the world by 2047, which the Prime Minister has been talking about, Viksit Bharat thing. So when you are imagining that much of growth for India, and obviously your energy requirement is also going to increase. That is precisely why India is actually now investing in alternative sources of energy, including renewable energy sector, solar energy, wind energy, all of these are major sources that we are looking at. And the Global Solar Alliance, which India initiated, is also a pointer towards why India is doing that. And the latest project scheme that the government has announced is, if you join a scheme that the government has uh, come out with, of putting a solar energy plant on your roof and drawing energy from it, you will get a good 300 unit power, which is essentially good enough to take care of your energy needs for a month or more. So this is the scheme that they are coming out, and India is obviously being closer to the equator as a good solar energy opportunity. And I think the government needs to do more work on this so that the renewable energy sector is growing much faster. But there is one roadblock that we see, because the essential material for your solar energy plants are coming from China. Probably we need to look at indigenous sources of doing that. How to go about it is something the government needs to discuss with the stakeholders and figure out how to become self-reliant as far as solar energy sector is concerned. We shouldn't be dependent on China for when you are really investing more on solar energy. We shouldn't be dependent on China for the essential material required to uh, grow as a solar energy nation. So that is what I feel about it.
One last question, Bipindraji. I think one of the biggest, I would like you to comment on this. One of the uh, biggest lessons which I see from this war for India is that how the West uses, some nations as pawns in their power game. Uh, there has been a perception that Ukraine has actually been a pawn in this game, which has been used by the West, and they have got both Russia and Ukraine engaged, and ultimately at the cost of Ukraine, at the cost of decimation of almost Ukraine, Russia is also bearing the brunt and getting weakened to some extent. Of late, we have seen over the last several years, because of the regional matrix, security matrix here, because we have China as a very hostile nation against us. So there was a growing proximity of India towards the West. And there are famous slogans like China slows, India grows. And the Western investments, especially in the post COVID era, we have seen that a lot of FDI is coming to India. A lot of multinational corporations, a lot of big names, they're moving their investments from China to India. But this bonhomie between the West and India. So, in context of how Ukraine has been used, so for the very, gullible people who generally believe, that like US, India, bhai bhai, or West and India bhai bhai. So, and we are natural allies because we are no liberal democracies. So, what's your take on this thing, and what's your message to these, overly optimistic people?
Yeah. So of course, I mean, when you look at the Ukraine-Russia war, which you rightly pointed out in your opening remarks, essentially it was expected that this war will be over, if not in weeks, within a couple of months. But what has happened is the war has prolonged for 2 years now, and it is likely to prolong for more months and years, maybe another year. It is likely to progress. Probably, if Donald Trump comes to power in the US, the war might end, because he has been talking about it quite frequently now, saying that if I come to power, I will end this Russia-Ukraine war in one day, essentially by saying that I will stop all supplies to Ukraine as far as this war is concerned. So essentially, what is keeping Ukraine alive at this point in time is the West's supplies, military equipment supplies to it, whether it is battle tanks or whether it is air defense equipment. I'm not going to the specific names, but overall, generally, these are the kind of equipment that they have given to Ukraine. So main battle tanks and air defense equipment and all that. So this is what is actually feeding the Ukrainians and making them survive in this battle that has happened. It's actually an attrition war. So before this Ukraine war, I mean, until 2020, when the Armenia-Azerbaijan war happened, everybody was talking about, I mean, revolution in military affairs. They keep talking about it, and they have always, even Indian military forces felt that future wars will be swift and short, and it will be, firepower intensive battle, and it will be over within days. That was the kind of impression people had. But what we see in Russia, Ukraine, or even in Israel, Hamas war that is currently going on since October last year. So the wars have started prolonging because technology is also kind of evolving, right? The military technology is also evolving, so it is also contributing to the survival of the weaker nation in a battle which is completely there is no match between Ukraine and Russia in terms of military capability. So this is what you're seeing right now, and of course, as I mentioned, it is being progressed, or it is being prolonged by the West, essentially because all said and done, Russia today people bracket it in the middle power category, and only the US and China are bracketed in the superpower categories at this point in time. But you cannot wish away Russia, any day, or at least now, or maybe in the near future. You cannot wish away Russia. Russia is going to stay as a major power with a lot of influence and with also a lot of military capability. So they have this this legacy, the USSR Soviet legacy that they carry, and that is going to continue for a long time. And see, if you compare Ukraine and Russia today, Russia is better off in terms of its military industrial complex, and they are able to manufacture drones or whatever equipment that they require at a much faster rate, ammunition that is required at a much faster rate than Ukraine is able to do it, and Ukraine is completely dependent on the West. Of course, Russia is also trying to figure out other sources, like North Korea is supplying them, all that ammunition they are supplying, and all that is happening. But yet, Russia is certainly better off. So this is a lesson that India needs to learn. We are already having a military conflict, though the intensity, the firepower intensity is negligible in Ladakh. You have a military conflict that is going on for the last 4 years now. So the Galwan battle that happened, and the firing of weapons that happened, the small arms that happened during the Kailash heights that we captured. So except for that, relatively there has not been use of much firepower. But who knows? With a lot of border infrastructure coming up all along the LAC today, line of actual control with China today, the two forces are getting eye to eye, situation very often now. So one trigger happy soldier on the border can actually trigger a major firepower battle between the two nations. So that is quite a possibility. So when that is the situation, what you see is that people tend to compare the Chinese capabilities with the Indian capabilities, military capabilities. I mean, they generally, there are two categories of people who analyze. One who do a bean to bean count. I mean, they have this many number of aircraft, this many number of battle tanks, and we have much lesser number. That is a bean to bean comparison. The other comparison that they do is in terms of capabilities, in terms of the troop morale. So these are also other factors that come into play, in terms of so Indian military has essentially shifted from a bean count to a capability measurement. So they have started measuring what is the Chinese capability and how are we able to counter that. So when that is the kind of situation that we face, um, if there is a war between India and China, will India have to depend on the West for some support? In my opinion, probably yes. You may have to entirely depend on, not entirely depend on them, but uh, depend on them to some extent, like what is happening in Ukraine. So Ukraine is dependent on the West for moral support, for diplomatic support, for geopolitical maneuverings and all that. So that kind of a thing might happen. Probably that is where we will depend on the West in terms of geopolitics and issues like that, but not necessarily for equipment. Because the government's push for Make in India and Atmanirbharta is towards becoming self-reliant as far as your military equipment requirements are concerned. So it's a fine balance that we need to make. We do need the West's support. Ultimately, we have to fight our own battle. So nobody is going to come and fight your battle. You have to fight your own battle. That is where the situation lies. And as I mentioned, the situation along the LAC might worsen anytime. The only fear that people have is if Pakistan and China come together and do a twin front
Then it will be a
war.
two-front war.
Two-front war is one of the fears that people have, and of course, India is making efforts to counter these possibilities, and we are developing our own strategies, our own battle plans, our own tactics, and all that. So, and again, nuclear war is another major concern. What if both Pakistan and China come together and do a nuclear strike on India? So, of course, China has a no first use policy, just like India has. But yet, I mean, if they decide that India is becoming too much of a pain in the wrong place, they might do that. So what do? Do you do a preemptive strike in that such a situation? Probably the nuclear doctrine needs to be the stated nuclear doctrine that we have, that we came out with in 2003, maybe needs to have a relook and how to go about it. There are a lot of questions and churning that is already happening in the Indian strategic community over these issues that I talked about. So yes, to answer your question in one line, yes, we will be dependent on the West for diplomatic maneuverings and putting pressure on China, and probably some military and economic sanctions and all that. But when it comes to fighting the battle, getting equipment to fight your battle and all, I think that battle needs to be fought by India on its own.
Thank you, Bipindra ji, for sharing your thoughts and such deep insights. And viewers, that's it for this episode, and we'll be back soon with another episode with a new topic and an expert. And if you've liked the video, please share the video, subscribe to the channel. If you'll press the bell icon, you can get the notifications. And if you have any questions for Bipindra ji, you can post them on in the comment section of our YouTube video, and we'll be very happy to take these questions to Bipindra ji and get back with answers. And once again, thank you very much, Bipindra ji. Namaste.
Thank you.